Hello and welcome to episode 70 of the Brass Junkies. I am your host, Andrew Hitz, and I am joined by my fellow host and my inspiration in life, Lance LaDuke. Lance, how are you today?
I'm feeling particularly inspirational today.
Well, that's good. I'm glad that you have warned both me and the audience that you're really going to be bringing it here.
I'm gonna use most of my brain today.
You generally play the euphonium, which is the easiest brass instrument, so you don't really necessarily have to use all of your brain. But
I would argue if I disagreed, but
tuba is harder, and yet our parts are about 5 times easier, which makes the whole thing net a lot easier than playing the euphonium. But anyway, I digress. So we have got a solo episode for you. How many people do you have in your solo episode, 2? Yeah, we used to get asked all the time, how many people you got in your brass quintet? Honest to God, we were asked that question in 20 states. Yeah, it was
the same guy. He just followed us around. Wait a minute. Now how many you got in that 5-piece band?
Somebody paid him a lot of money to troll us in person. This was internet trolling really reeked of effort back in the early 2000s, so it was a lot easier to just pay someone to actually drive to Minnesota where Boston Brass was playing. So
actual troll.
So we are doing...
Widows 3.
Yes, there you go. We are doing our first Listener's Choice episode today, and we have gotten a couple of ideas for topics to talk about from 2 different listeners, one of whom is a Patreon patron, which is awesome. And we are going to talk about those 2 ideas, and we are going to, every once in a while, do one of these Listener's Choice episodes. We will post the next time. These were just unsolicited emails, which we love, both for Brass Junkies. I love them for TEM as well. But these were just unsolicited emails from people saying, hey, you should talk about this sometime, or you should have somebody talk about this. And people are starting to say no a lot to us for interviews. So, no, I'm just making that up. That hasn't happened yet, but it will at some point.
Oh, it did happen once, actually.
Yeah, it has happened once, for sure.
There's only one direct no that I know of.
And it was incredibly polite. So, and
it's not the one I was thinking of. Then there must be 2.
Oh, well, yeah, there was 2. Yeah, fair enough. So, yeah, so we've said too much. So I was thinking of the other one, and she's one of the busiest humans in the world. So, but yes. Anyway, we digress again. So, but we think that this will be kind of cool and it can involve people in terms of fans of the show who we do hear from with some frequency, which is great and is always helping us to make the podcast better. I mean, we're already changing lives, so we just want to change even more and change them just better.
That's right.
So
more good.
Speaking of changing lives, Parker Mouthpieces provides the hosting for the Brass Junkies. Parker Mouthpieces offers fine, life-changing, customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, which is easy, but it still helps to have a good mouthpiece, and tuba, which it really helps in spite of the non-challenging parts, including the Andrew Hitz Artist model tuba mouthpiece and the Lance LaDuke model euphonium mouthpiece.
What?
You can find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And we also there's like a whole school of music that helps sponsor us, which is crazy. I mean, you tell that to I've dropped out of 2 degrees, and now there's a whole school of music that supports our crappy little podcast. That's cool. Why don't you tell these people about that school?
It's actually the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is supporting us. And they've focused their efforts through Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and specifically the Mary Papert School of Music. And the brass area is the ringleader of the brass area. I think that's his official title is Jim Nova. Special
Grand
thanks
Poobah.
to Jim. the Grand Poobah, for helping spread the word about the great stuff that's going on at Duquesne. So if you want to find out more about the brass program, there may be a bass program. I don't know of it, but the brass program specifically, you can click on the link in the show notes below, and you can find out about the folks who are teaching each of the brass instruments, and the different playing opportunities that exist at that fine institution. So thanks very much to Duquesne University and Jim Nova, especially.
If you wanted to major in fishing, it would be kind of weird to go to a school in downtown Pittsburgh.
It's true. Well, we have 3 rivers. You could get probably carp.
Exactly 3. Oh, I'm not saying that there's no, and certainly Western Pennsylvania has plenty of fishing, but I'm not sure if I'd go for an urban campus if I was majoring in bass fishing.
Good point. Can you major in bass fishing?
Probably. Colleges will take your money for just about anything at this point. So
good point.
My guess would be yes. So the other thing is that somewhere the answer is yes. The other thing was that we wanted to thank our Patreon patrons. You guys are awesome. Russell Edders is one of the people who suggested the second topic that we're going to talk about today. But all of you are really great. We just got some more this week, and it's really, really great. If you want to help us out with a small financial donation for each episode, which is only 26 times a year, then we've actually decided we're going to start to release one per day. We haven't told our patrons yet, so their financial commitment is going to go up by a factor of 7. So we're just gonna recycle old material and just call it new and just charge them all until they leave. So not true. Every other week you can donate as little as like $2 a month, basically, to help us out. But it really means a lot. If you'd like to investigate that and to help make more episodes like this incredibly succinct and to the point one already, you can go to patreon.com/thebrassjunkies and you can learn more there. So, without further ado, we will now get to the listener's choice portion of the festivities. So the first question, which is from a listener by the name of Frank in Gloucester, Massachusetts, he asked, and I quote, "Did you have the opportunity to meet any of your musical heroes when you were first getting started out in music?" This is a really great question, and instantly a bunch of things came to mind, but I think we each whittled it down to 2 things that we wanted to talk about that we had experienced as youngsters, which kind of helped propel us forward in music. So, Lance, why don't you go first with your first tale?
I cheated.
Uh-oh.
I always cheat when you have questions like this. So the first one is actually my grandfather. And my grandfather was a guy named Kenny Smith, my mother's father, and he was a drummer in the 1930s and 1940s. And I grew up in southwestern Lower Michigan, and he worked in the milk industry. So he would go to the farms and pick up the milk in those humongo milk canisters and load them in and out of a truck, or load them, I guess, into the truck, and then drive the truck to the dairy and load them out at the dairy. It was much more efficient than loading them in and then out at the farm, because then you just left them. Anyway, so because he worked in the food industry, it kept him from being drafted. So he didn't end up going to war, which also then enabled him to, on weekends, he would drive to Chicago and played with, he had something like 35 scrapbooks of just all these incredible acts and folks. He knew the Wallendas, the Flying Wallendas. He knew, I mean, just kind of everybody. But in fact, I'm looking at, on my wall, I have a picture of him with Sidney Bechet. And I just, none of my family listen to this, so they won't know. For Christmas this year, I had a stack of about 20 or so glass 78s that were recorded in the late 1930s and early 1940s with Sidney Bechet and Max Miller and a variety of like early folks from jazz. And they would record direct to disc, which I was too stupid to know that was even a thing. So there was just a blank that they would put on there, and you would play in front of this microphone attached to this turntable, and it would etch it directly to this glass 78, and so I just had those all transferred to digital. So we're about to. This will be the first time I've sent many of those people gifts in 30 years. So they'll be very, very surprised, and pleasantly so. So, but what I remember is why it's so, why it was or continues to be so influential is that it was an indication to me that music is a way of life, and it's a thing that makes life better. And it's every party when I was a kid had live music at it. And all of my mom's twin brother was a drummer as well, and most of their friends were musicians, and so live music was a thing that just happened anytime we were all together. And I remember fondly sitting at I must have been 3 or 4, and at one of these parties, and my cousins and I sort of took turns. My grandpa would put us up on one of his knees and give us a stick, and we could play the ride cymbal while he was continuing to play in this sort of open jam session thing. So seeing him play gigs and like that, and then he'd be in these parades, and you'd see it was just like it was very strange. It was very cool. It just made me feel very special. Like I knew this guy. This was my grandfather, and here he's making all these people happy by playing music, and this was just a part of who he was. And there was a drum set up in the living room of my grandparents' house, and there was this. He knew the Zildjian family, so he had this enormous ride cymbal hanging on the wall, and he's you could hit that thing and go out and walk around your house and come back in, and it'll still be ringing. Okay, I don't know why you would, but thank you for that. And it was just it was inseparable from who he was, and it never to see that up close regularly was very transformative and very important. And it sort of also, I think, I mean, now this is a little bit armchair psychology. I think I've always tried to be the same person on stage and off, and I don't know if that's related to that or not, but I just was struck by the sense that he was just my grandpa, whether he was playing a gig or making breakfast or watching TV or doing whatever he was the same person. So there wasn't like this stage persona and then who he was the rest of the time. So it was a very powerful, cool, impactful thing. And I think it just got me listening a lot more and paying attention to the way, the effect that it had on others. Because there's this sort of magic that happened whenever they were playing, he and the band were playing, was just to watch the audience's reaction to that was really, really powerful. And I'm sure that stuck with me somewhere too. So that's my cheat story number 1.
There you go. That was
I can be tender.
That was better than I thought it was going to be.
That's what I thought. See,
right?
Yeah. Blind squirrel.
Oh goodness. Yeah, good stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, you did all right there. So
not bad, huh?
Yeah, not bad. The first story that I wanted to tell was the summer of 1989, and so this ended up being the summer right before I started studying at Tanglewood. In April of 1989, I got my Eagle Scout, and but that summer, I think this was right before my 14th birthday, this concert. So it was What was your project? What was your Eagle Scout project? My Eagle Scout project was helping it was, I think, about 30 families in my hometown who were living below the poverty line get Christmas dinners and presents for their youngsters. Wow. Yeah, right? I didn't know you had that in you. How about that? So, wow. Yeah, right? Yeah, I was totally solving the world's problems. So, So, but
That's a good one.
I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about the cool thing that happened to me afterwards, which was that there was this thing called Eagle Career Day, and I hope it's still happening, where you got to contact someone in the industry that you wanted to possibly work in. And most Eagle Scouts are not 13; they're like 17, so they at least have a little bit more of a sense. But I had I knew I wanted to be a tuba player. So the Boy Scout Council on my behalf contacted Chester Schmitz in the Boston Symphony, and I had met Chester many times at that point, but I had never worked with him, and they basically asked if I could shadow him for a day, with the Boston Symphony. And Chester actually said, actually, I've got an even better idea. There is something called the Brass Spectacular, which is happening at Tanglewood, and he can come and be my guest there. And this was the Canadian brass and the brass quintets from the Boston Symphony and the New York Philharmonic were all doing a concert together in the shed, and so I got to go to the rehearsal, and that's the first time that I met Joe Alessi, who I've since become good friends with. First time I met Phil Smith, Chuck Dallenbach, Fred Mills. It was just like Charlie Schluter, Norm Bolter. It was. I think it was Norm. It might have been Ron Barron. But anyway, it was Ron Barron. But it was just incredible how every single one of those people, as you or I would do. But it was so great and have done. But it was just so powerful that, first of all, Chester took me around to everybody as if I was his prize student. He was just like. He was like a father to me those 2 days. I got to the rehearsal and to the concert and was hanging out backstage, and it was really cool to get to hear that much. And I heard like Joe Alessi and Phil Smith playing like right in front of me. It was very powerful. And Chester and I have been good friends ever since then. So that really kind of brought us together in a lot of ways. And that day, or I guess 2 days, changed my life. So powerful stuff.
Do you still owe him money?
No, I do not owe him money. That's a good. He actually he told, and this was the idea of one of my parents. I don't remember which one, but Chester told me that he was in Boy Scouts and that he didn't get his Eagle Scout, that once you turn 18 you can't get Eagle anymore, and that he had received his Life badge, which is right before Eagle. That's the second to last rank, but he had qualified for Life right before he turned 18. And but he had never received his Life badge, and so one of my parents was like, "Guess what you should do?" They said you should go and buy a $2 Life patch and mail it to him with the thank you note saying, here's the Life badge you never got. And he was like over the moon about that. So
that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, that was some good. That was a good networking idea there from not that they were like that jaded about the world, but it was like, this is going to make him happy and remember you. So do it. So he still talks about that every once in a while. So yeah, that's my first story.
Well, that's pretty good. So did that give you a sense of quintetting? Was that a thing? Like, did that plant a seed in your head that was a way?
Yes, although at that point I had already seen Canadian Brass perform, and I had already seen Empire Brass perform, and I'd seen each of them, I think, more than once. But getting to be backstage at Tanglewood, where I had been in front of the stage like 100 times already, out in the audience, but had never been backstage, and there was always a wall built up. There just is in rock and roll and just about any. And that's my second story, which I'll get to after yours, is another one where the wall came down. But being able to be in that kind of close proximity to those people who were some of my heroes was just a day I'll never forget.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Yep.
So I have actually I just remembered one. This is I'm adding. This is a bonus story because it's short and concise.
Okay, this is for Patreon patrons only. So if you're not, just
I could save that one. Do you want to do that?
Yeah, but no, you already announced it. I was actually joking. I was saying they should just say la 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 la. So no, give everyone the bonus.
So I'm in high school one day, and I walk in. They used to hang out in the band room all the time, and it's lunchtime, and I go to the band room, and the band director's standing there, and he goes, "Go to the library." And I'm like, "Okay." And I said, "What's going on?" He goes, "Just go to the library." So I go down to the library, and I look around, and there's some of the choir kids and some of the band kids, and there's maybe, I don't know, 8 of us, 10 of us, something like that. And we're like, "What blazes did we do wrong?" We thought we were in trouble for some reason. And the next thing I know, the principal comes out and he goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, Tommy Shaw." And Tommy Shaw grew up or lived, he had a house in the town I grew up in. And he was home for whatever reason. He was the guitarist for Styx, if you're younger than me. And so he was like this. We always knew where Tommy Shaw's house was. We'd like drive by hoping that we would see Tommy Shaw. And so Tommy Shaw comes out, like just hangs out with us for an hour and talks to us about the music industry and how he got started and just any question we wanted to fire off at him. This was kind of at their peak. I mean, they had, a pretty good 4 or 5 year run there where they had a bunch of stuff on the radio. And I just remember this kind of surreal experience of meeting a quote unquote rock star. I guess that's not even fair. I mean, he was a bona fide rock star.
There's no quote unquote about that.
So that was that's just sort of a bonus thing that I just remembered actually right now. It was a very cool experience to have him come talk to us. I'm very generous of him. So anyway, my other story relates to the time when I was actually, I guess it would have been just a couple of years before this happened. So I switched to the euphonium from the trumpet in 9th grade because my concussion healed. No, because I decided that playing high on the trumpet was going to shorten my lifespan. And my face used to turn spectacularly purple. And so my band director had studied with Leonard Falcone, and there's a competition in his name and honor. He's a legendary figure in music education in the state of Michigan for sure. He taught at Michigan State University for 40 years. He was the low brass guy for 40 years and was the director of bands for 24 years. And my band director was one of his students in the late 1960s. And side note, then when my master's, I worked on the first attempt at getting a master's was at the University of Akron with the great Bob Jorgensen, was the director of bands then, and he was another former Falcone student. So I kept sort of running into these folks, and they kept influencing me. And the third person that I'll bring up is another example of that. So I switched to euphonium and kind of took to it right away, and because, like you said, it's the easiest one. Well, and actually, there's something to that, because I used to, without getting too maudlin, I had a less than ideal childhood, and practicing the trumpet or the cornet was sort of, I'm guessing because my mom's dad, as mentioned before, was a musician. My dad's dad was a musician. I never had a chance to meet him. So for whatever reason, whenever I was practicing, that time was I was sort of left to my own devices. And so then I practiced all the time, which if you are a 6th, 7th, or 8th grader and you practice all the time, well, good things are going to happen, because none of your peers do. And so I kind of shot to the front of the line there and had established these, practice habits, so that by the time I took to the euphonium, it was an easy transition, because all of the sudden the struggle which I had in terms of my embouchure went away, and I still had the facility and the work ethic to go after it. And so I hit up my band director, who I knew was a student of Falcone, and I asked for lessons, and he said he wasn't teaching lessons, but here, do this. And so he handed me this record, which is a piece of vinyl, and it's circular, and it has these groove in it.
People know what records are now. Those are that's the only medium that sells now.
So he gave me this record and put a stack of sheet music on top of it and said, just go listen to this, and here's the music that goes with this. And the record was Leonard Falcone and his baritone. And Leonard Falcone had this con, if I'm wrong about the con, man, am I going to hear about it. But he had this bell front baritone that he played. I'd never heard the baritone or euphonium on record before, and I wore this thing out. I mean, literally, my band director had to go buy another one because I gave it back to him, and it was well loved. And I just learned all the tunes on there. And the Beret 1 and 2, the Bach cello suite thing that you play and that I play in recital, the Shores of the Mighty Pacific, Estrelita, like all these just great tunes, I learned. And so that kind of helped me. He was my first teacher in a roundabout way. And my band director would sort of nudge me and say, why don't you try this or maybe try that. So one day, we had I guess it was all the brass students we went into the auditorium, and we got to hear this recital by a guy named Tom Gillette. And Tom Gillette at the time was in one of the Navy bands. He was either in Chicago or on the West Coast, but he was an alum of the same high school that I was from, and we had the same band directors, and he went to Michigan State, and he studied with Leonard Falcone. And so he did this recital for us, and he closed with this piece, the original Fantasy, the Pichi Simone Mantilla arrangement of this tune. And euphonium players know this thing has something like 645,000 notes in it. I mean, it's just like a complete tour de force, one of these Warhorse theme and variations. All euphonium music is faster than hell or Danny Boy. And this is one of those that has both. And it starts with this big flourish, and then it just goes through this incredible series of ever evolving variations. And my jaw just hit the floor. It was the Falcone record did this to me, and then this experience did it to me again, where what I thought was possible on the instrument was completely blown out of the water. It reminds me of like the first time I saw Monosel, and I just thought everything I thought I knew about brass chamber music is gone. It's done. It's a completely different thing. And it actually happened again while I was in high school. I'll go back to Tom here in a second, but the symphonic variants, the Jim Kernow piece came out when I was in high school, and Phil Franke played it while I was at the University of Illinois before he went to be in the Marine Band. And that's another instance where I had no concept that the instrument could play as high as it did, as low as it did, as facile as it did. And Tom, going back to Tom, this recital did that for me. And I remember my friends turning around periodically and looking at me like, well, you got to do this now. This kind of like expectation. Hate your face. And so I remember meeting him and just sort of stumbling and not knowing really what to say to him. I didn't know what to do with any of that. I was so, it just like blew the back of my head off, and I just was completely ill prepared for the notion that the instrument could do this. And the cool thing is I've gotten to know him, and he's a friend. And in fact, is it this calendar year, I think, or maybe a year ago, he runs a community band in Michigan now, and he had me back to play a solo with that group, and we got to hang out quite a bit. And I did a couple of master classes, and I was able to share this very story to him and my band director, who were both in the room, and to thank them, which is a funny thing. You go through life and you just sort of take some things for granted that you'll have an opportunity to thank people for the influence they've had on you. And don't wait, I guess, if there's a piece of advice. Well, for example, Bob Jorgensen, we lost a couple of years ago, and Chris Matten is another one. And I hope they know how I felt about them, but I wasn't going to let this opportunity pass a year ago with those two guys in the room. So Tom is just like, he's also like one of the great pranksters in history. I mean, I would stack him up against Jimmy Kimmel, George Clooney. He did some of the most ridiculous, crazy things imaginable. The one story of his that I feel safe in telling is he was in the Navy band and used to get in trouble for a variety of things. He was not what we would call military material, nor was I, but he...
Nor was I, but I wasn't stupid enough to sign up.
Well, So he is in trouble for something, and he's in San Diego, and it's in the winter. It's like February or something. So it's not cool. I mean, it's cool by California standards, but still not like, Michigan or Pittsburgh, whatever. So I'm painting the picture specifically for a reason. So he's due to get out of the Navy in like May, and he got in trouble for something or another over the holidays. And so his punishment in this month of February was that he had to paint this barracks. And so he's out applying something to the side of this barracks, and the boss comes out and asks him what he's doing. He said, "Oh, this is a special primer, and if I put this primer up there first, then I'll paint over this primer, and it'll help the paint adhere to the wall." And they go, "Okay, very, very well, as you were." And so he applies this to the entire barracks, and then he lets it dry, and then he paints the entire barracks. And then he gets out in April or May. And then over the summer, his friends called to let him know that his plan worked. And what he was applying was liquid wax. And he waxed the entire building and then painted over it. And then when it got hot enough, sheets of paint are just falling off the side of this building. And he is by then a veteran. And there's nothing they can do about it. So that's the guy. My son is paying attention in the other room. Uh-oh. He's like cracking up. Oh, dear. Yeah. What have I done? So that's Tom Gillette, an inspiration for multiple reasons.
That's spectacular. That's so great. I always thought that you were supposed to apply a layer of wax before painting a house, but I guess this is a story of caution for us all.
Yeah, that's right. Learn, people.
So the final story from me is I was a senior in high school. I was taking lessons from Julian Dixon, who was a tuba player at the time in Boston. He now has returned to his native California. He is the tuba euphonium professor at Sacramento State. Phenomenal musician, performer, teacher, just incredible. I was really lucky to have him. And he came personally recommended from Sam Palafian, who traveled way too much at the time for me to study with him during the year. And he said, "You're studying with Julian Dixon." So I said, okay. So I used to have my lessons at BU, and we would always meet in the lobby, and then he would find a room, and then we would, I'd schlep all my stuff in there. So he comes out to the lobby, tells me what room I'm in. I got to take 2 trips. So I'm walking past one of the rehearsal rooms, and the door is cracked just a little bit, but you can't see in, but I can hear. And I'm like focused on my lesson. And I kind of noticed that, I noticed that there's a jazz band of some kind playing in there. And then I put my first load of stuff down. I walk back past, and then I'm like, I notice as I walk back past a second time, I'm like, wait a minute, that's ridiculously good. And then I walk past a third time, and I'm just like, my mind is blown as I actually am focusing on this playing. I go in, and I say to my teacher, I said, "Who the heck is that in 163?" And he said, "Oh, do you not know who that is?" And I said, "No, but they sound ridiculous." And he said, "That's Wynton Marsalis and his septet." And I'm like, wait, what? And
like, how many guys are in that septet?
Well played. So he said, and I said, "Holy crap, that's awesome." And he said, "Do you want to meet him?" And I was like, "What?" Like, yes, of course I want to meet him. It turns out that Julian and Wynton know each other well enough from like way back in the day that Julian, on behalf of a student, could just like literally barge in on septet rehearsal and just be like, "Wynton, sorry to interrupt, but you got to meet this kid." And so they brought me in, and Wynton said that they were playing a couple of shows at the Regatta Bar in Cambridge, and Wynton asked me if I wanted to go to one of the shows, and I was like, yeah. And he said, and he said something to the effect of, "Well, I think it's 21 plus, but I'll get you in, And he said there will be 2 tickets for you at the door, whatever. And I'm just like blown away. So I go to the Regatta Bar. Sure enough, it was 21 plus, and they basically branded me and my high school friend, who were allowed in because we were on the band's guest list, and we're like red X'd with don't serve them alcohol. but they were playing two shows. First one was at 8 p.m. and then the second one was at 10 p.m. And they played for about an hour, and then there was an hour in between shows, and then the second show. So we got tickets to the first show, and we had standing room only seats, which ended up being seats, but they were seats that were basically on stage. And when I say basically on stage, I could have reached, and I got long arms, but I could have reached the edge of the ride cymbal with my left hand, with my back touching the back of my chair. I mean, it was like my friend and I were like basically in the line of the front line of the band, because they would play in a corner at the Regatta Bar, which was just, I mean, talk about a formative musical experience. It was just. It was remarkable. I think it was the second tune where Wynton turned to his right, so he was looking right down the line at my friend and I, as Wes Anderson, the great alto sax player, was playing a solo, and Wynton happened to see me, because I'm about like 25 feet maybe from him at this point, and he gives me this like all-knowing nod, like hey, like we go way back, and he's super happy to see me, and I just kind of give him a nod back, like, yeah, this isn't that big a deal, and I'm like just freaking out, My buddy's laughing at me because he's like, you two are acting like you know each other well, and you talk to him for like 30 seconds. But then the really cool part was that afterwards, so they've got an hour off in between, and they just played a burning set. And when you're Wynton Marsalis, everybody wants your time everywhere you go. I mean, there is no off unless you're like behind a closed door. They cleared the whole place out, and Wynton, of that 60 minutes, Wynton spent, I think, 45 minutes until they opened the hall, the club back up, and the band had to go in back. But he took me personally around and introduced me to every single member of the band for 45 of those 60 minutes that they had off in between those two shows. And I mean, so like I ended up having like over 5-minute conversations with every single person. I'm talking like Wycliffe Gordon, Eric Reed on piano, Herlin Riley on drums. I mean, some of the greatest jazz players of the last 50 years. And every one of them was because Wynton gave me such an introduction, like, hey, this kid's with me, you need to know this kid. And it was just like something that I always tried to, not in any way comparing myself or my stature in the music business with that of Wynton Marsalis, but I always carried that day with me in Boston Brass, because as you know, when you're on the road, there are some days when you're really happy to be there, and then there are other days when maybe there's some frustrating situation at home that my wife is having to deal with by herself because I'm in Iowa, and it's just really wish that I was home and not on the road. Well, when there's some high school kid who has the opportunity to meet you, like they don't know that you're dealing with something at home, they have no idea. And so that's just like, that's their opportunity to meet, a quote unquote famous tuba player, which is kind of redundant and not possible. But I always remembered that day and just how incredibly gracious. And Wynton actually apologized to me at the end of spending almost his entire break of, with me and introducing me to every member of the band. And by the way, to be clear, like he took me around to each member of the band and then stood there with me. And so it was like the three of us talking, and then he took me to the next guy and it was the three of us talking. And he didn't just like kind of pass me around the band. It was just, I couldn't believe how gracious he was. And I went home and I already was a huge fan of his, but I mean, I bought like every album that he had ever put out. And I mean, it was, I became a super fan. I've not had the chance to thank him since then, because that was just such a hugely formative experience for me. And my friend and I floated home, so we were very happy. So I'm sure Wynton listens to every episode. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for really, again, it was a life-changing thing. So
it's one of those things where it's like the bigger deal they are in your head, the less, or not even in your head, the bigger deal they are, the cooler they are. I mean, that's one of these sort of oft repeated things, that the best and the brightest in kind of any field are also happen to be among the nicest people. And there's people who stick out because they're spectacular at what they do, and they're also a jerk. There's just not that many, fortunately, not that many versions of the story. Most of the time, at least my experience has been, you meet your heroes and they surpass your expectations, and it's a real cool. It's funny. It sort of brings it full circle in a way. I remember listening to my grandpa talk about that for a while. These guys would just go. He would drive Chicago, and they would just play. He'd get there Friday and night, and he'd set up. And they would literally play all night. They'd play till dawn, and then they would get something to eat, and they'd sleep during the day, and they'd do that again on Saturday night and get up, and then he would go home because he had to work Monday through Friday. And he said that they would play a set, and then they'd go across the street or wherever. There was just jazz everywhere. There was just music everywhere. And they would just go hang out and be supportive of these other musicians. And he had these amazing stories of listening to Sarah Vaughan, or like hanging out with Cab Calloway and Cab Calloway's band after a set or between a set. And they all it was like this, they were all inventing this genre in lots of places in the U.S., but Chicago definitely made its mark. And he was a part of that, and just had these incredible stories about, Cab Calloway of all people. Like, just like he was just a cool guy, and we hung out, and like sometimes they would just like guys from Cab's band would sit in with these guys, and his band would go sit in with those guys, and it continues. And I don't know, not to get too serious about this, but one of the things I think you and I are trying to do is to pull back the curtain on some of these quote unquote famous, and in some instances actual famous brass players, and give you a sense that these are really awesome people, and they have cool stories, and they're very, very interested in sharing their story and helping others.
And they've all got their own. It's like, Carol Jansch is way into ultimate frisbee, which is cool. I mean, it's just like, that's not normal. I mean, that's not common is what I meant. It's not abnormal. It's just everybody's kind of got their. Pat Sheridan is like passionate about vegan cooking. I mean, it's just everybody's kind of got their thing that has nothing to do with tuba or trumpet or brass quintet or playing in a symphony orchestra, and it's kind of cool to get to know these people in on a human level as well. And today happens to, as you were just talking about that, I just was thinking that today, back this day, as we sit here recording this, back in 1995, was the first time I ever had the opportunity to meet somebody in Fish. And I was at a show in Champaign, Illinois, at Assembly Hall, there on the campus of University of Illinois. And there was, after the show by the tour bus, there was a few people, and it turned out that Paige McConnell, the piano player, was in the middle of eating dinner on his tour bus and saw a few people standing outside of the tour bus and interrupted his own dinner to come out and to talk to us. And everybody was like super starstruck except for me. I was just like firing questions at him. And it was really funny. It was like Paige and I were just having a conversation with a bunch of people around. At one point, I realized that after like 2 minutes, and I kind of paused, and nobody spoke up. And then I was like, well, he's going to leave. So I just was like, I'm resuming the interview. So, but I was talking to him about being a music major and this and that. And it was like, he stayed out there for 10 to 15 minutes and then apologized and said, I should go back and, finish my dinner, et cetera. And this is after they had just played 2 70-minute sets with an encore. I mean, I'd played a 2.5-hour show, not including the set break, and then he's interrupting his own dinner to come out. And again, it was like kind of floated home. It was like, one of my heroes is just a normal dude who like very graciously gave his time, and just like Wynton, I never really drew this parallel, genuinely was apologizing, like for needing to cut it, because he could see how excited, especially me and the other people who got to witness my interview of him, like around, he just saw how excited we were, and he kind of had this genuine vibe, like, I wish I could do this all night, but but we can't, because we're also about to drive to Wisconsin in half an hour. So
I did that to Mark O'Connor one time. I lived in this little town called Granville, Ohio for a while, and there's a Denison University's there, and it's a small school, but deep pockets. And there was the one year, the there's a concert series there, and they usually had a half a dozen or 8 concerts, but it was like the 50th anniversary or something. So they had fewer concerts, but the concerts were Itzhak Perlman, Yo-Yo Ma, Bobby McFerrin. Like,
Yep.
that's pretty good. So either that year or the next year, they brought Mark O'Connor in. And I was always working in Pittsburgh. I was living in Ohio and driving back and forth, playing with River City, teaching. And so I always ended up missing these things. But I happened, and I was going to miss this Mark O'Connor concert, but I was home, and I was in this coffee shop, and I saw this poster that said he was giving a master class, free master class. I was like, awesome. So I go to this master class, and you and I have been in this position, 1,000 times. I go in, and I'm thinking, it's Mark freaking O'Connor. So this place is going to be packed. Well, for whatever reason, it's like me and 8 other people, a couple people from the community, a couple of violin students from Denison, and
anytime
Mark
my master classes aren't packed, I'm like, but I'm really important. Like, what else could possibly be going on to justify this scenario playing out?
Yeah. So this was
that's awesome,
perfect, because I'm sitting there and I waited, and I was like, I'm going to be respectful, and if there's students here, this is for them, and they should get to ask whatever. So he played just, it was mind blowing. It was just, I'm like 8 feet away from him, and he's playing this just incredible stuff. And then he gets done and he talks a little bit, but basically it was a Q&A. And so the students had like 3 questions. There were softballs, and he let us set them up. And so I kept I'd wait 5 Mississippi. And if there wasn't a question, then I'm just like, blah, 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 coming through. And I basically did this for like a half an hour. And finally he's like, okay, I got to go, and like out the back door. But I remember I asked, one of the questions was, I was a big Mark O'Connor fan at the time, and he had done the soundtrack for this thing on PBS called Liberty. And on the soundtrack was this duet that he did with Wynton. So see, we're tying everything together now. See, we're professional podcasters. I said, I'm a brass player, and I was a big fan of this duet in particular. Can you talk about what it was like to, I know you wrote that duet. What was that process like, and what was the recording of it like? And he just had all this incredible stuff to say about Wynton. And one thing that really stuck with me was he said, I didn't really realize it at the time, but the softest trumpet playing is so much louder than the softest violin playing. I was ill prepared for that. And I was asking him to do this ridiculous stuff that was just like, you don't ask Wynton Marsalis to do the things I was asking him to do, but he just was so nice. He was just trying to do it. And so it was one of these deals where there's an Arnold Jacobs story before as well, where to be a good colleague, he needed to figure out, there's just something about the physics of this instrument, and I need to adapt what I'm doing to help this guy out and be a better colleague.
Huh. Yeah, that Jacob story that Rex told us in a masterclass once was that they were doing Ein Heldenleben, and whoever the extra was playing those parallel fifths with the tuba, and was not having a good soft playing day, and that it was Reiner who stopped and made a big deal of it, and then they did it again. And again, the sub was way too loud, and then they stopped, and then as Reiner was ripping into this guy for being like a horrible human being and someone who should be locked up or killed or something like that, they were real gentle back in the day. That was when Jacobs all of a sudden realized that he had completely inadvertently thrown this guy who he was friends with under the bus, because he could have just upped his volume the second time when it was kind of apparent that, just to give him a little bit of cover, and he didn't do that. And he didn't do it in time to save him from Reiner's wrath. So it's better to sound right than to be right. So as was hammered into me. So, and sometimes you can't do either.
Yeah.
So at least that's been the story of my career. So, all right. So we have gone long with the first part. So I think we're just going to, which is weird because we're always, especially me, brevity is the one thing I am known for. So we are going to, I think
I'm just going to leave them there. I'm just going to walk away.
That was the first time I think I've overtly seen you intentionally take the high road. So that was kind of weird. That was
I do have
you just don't use it. you generally use it all up and having a healthy relationship with your girlfriend, and I don't usually get any of that.
Point.
So, nor do I. To be clear, nor do I deserve it. So yeah, way too many miles on the behind the wheel on the other side of that equation with you. So anyway, I digress for a third time. We are gonna do the second one. We're gonna tease, but basically Russell Edders, and we're gonna do we'll do another one of these with that, and maybe with one other topic that someone sends in. He wanted to hear about advice on college auditions and applications, and I think we're each going to tell the story now of how we auditioned for college, but then for the next listener's choice, we are going to, Lance, you just recently did an interview. Can you tell us about that interview first, and then we'll kind of do a deep dive on that sometime soon?
Yeah, so I think it's safe to tease this. We're Pedal Note Media is going to be expanding, and you're going to be hearing more about another show that I'm going to be ushering into the wide world. And one of maybe the first episode, we haven't finalized it, is with a guy named Colby Carson, who's the head of recruiting at Carnegie Mellon University, and he gave a really fantastic sort of masterclass about the process of applying for college and what the parents ought to be thinking about, what students should be thinking about, and then likewise for grad school. And so that will be coming up. But I thought it would be a great opportunity for Andrew and me, especially since Russell had asked this question, to do a deeper dive specifically for brass players, and to let you kind of hear what we think based on having heard a lot of auditions and going through the process on both sides of it, and having so many good friends and colleagues that teach at the college level. We both have very strong opinions about how there's some definite do's and don'ts, and we want to share them. For
sure. So for today, let's share the stories about how we auditioned for college. Yep. And then we will hit up a second listener's choice. And in fact, why don't you go ahead and send us an email at pedalnotemedia@gmail.com, and you can also click on the email link at pedalnotemedia.com on our website. But we can start to take some solicitations for the second half of that next episode, and so go ahead and start sending those in, and then we'll take one of the ideas that we really like and we'll run with it. So I will go first, and then I will hand it off to you, Lance. I ended up auditioning at 6 different schools, I believe. The first thing that I did was Sam Palafian, who was never my regular teacher. By the way, in terms of the formative experiences, I could have told 16 different Sam Palafian stories that had no overlap on them at all in terms of him doing incredible things for me as a kid over and over and over and over and over again. I mean, I could fill up like 3 months worth of Brass Junkies episodes with just stories about Sam and what he did for me. So, but I studied with him every summer at Tanglewood, starting the very summer after, when I was 14 in 1990, so the summer after the Brass Spectacular concert. But so I asked him for a list because not all famous teachers not all famous players are created equal as teachers, and so to say the least, and also not all of them are going to click as well with me or with anybody. So I had a real ally there, and he told me he told me one person actually to avoid. Should I say that name? No.
Absolutely.
And again, it wasn't this is a bad human. It was just like that's not going to be a good fit for you. Your brand of crazy hits is not going to line up well with that dude. So I was like, all right, fair enough. But then he told me, a number of places. And one of those, of course, was Northwestern, which is where I ended up. But I then took a tour in early December with my father, and we went to a whole bunch of schools before the auditions happened. I visited David Federley and had a lesson with him. I visited Warren Deck and had a lesson with him. I visited Ron Bishop and had a lesson with him. I visited Rex Martin at Northwestern, had a lesson with him, and I had really great experiences with all of them. I truly, all 4 of them. It was like 4 for 4, easily. But there was something about my lesson with Rex Martin and the combination of that and Northwestern, and that was just like it was incredible. I mean, there was just like everything clicked at one time. And I actually I list David Federle as one of my teachers, even though I've only taken 4 lessons with him ever. But that's how powerful those lessons were. So you don't really get better at teaching music in terms of a one-on-one situation or master classes than David Federle, like full stop, end statement. But Rex and I had we just clicked. Like, it was incredible how much we clicked, and I'm so thankful that. And in fact, I didn't even go back to Northwestern to audition. In March, I played with him. I played for him for 5 minutes, and he then said to me, he said, "How are your grades?" And I said, "They're all A's and B's." And he then, I'm not making this up, he looked up at the ceiling and said, "Thank you, God." And then he said, "Your audition's over." And I was like, "Audition?" And he said, "You're in." I was like, well, okay then. So that was, and that was really great, obviously, because that's, not the easiest school to get into. I don't know if he was in a mood or what, but it all, and that was it. And I did audition at the other places, formally, but it was pretty clear at that point that that's where I was headed. And part of that was also the actual lesson portion with him. So that was how my audition process went.
Right. Well, mine, as you won't be shocked, there's a story. There's always a story. So I knew that I wanted to go to a big school. I knew that I needed to go to a state school because I wasn't going to be able to afford it otherwise. And so I applied to 2 schools. I applied to Michigan State University, and I applied to the University of Michigan. And it's a tale of 2 cities, I tell you. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that this took place in 1984 and 1985. How old are you? It was that sort of winter. So, exactly. So, most of the people involved, I'm going to say some not nice things about my experience at the University of Michigan. And since that time, most of the people that were there are not. And I have dear friends who teach there and have gone through there. So, as much as I would like to delight in bashing them, I'm just going to tell you the story of what happened to me. So anyway, so I go to my audition in Michigan State, and I take the train from Niles, Michigan to Lansing, and I get off the train, and there's this snowstorm, and it's a humdinger. I mean, feet and feet of snow. And I don't know anything about how to get to the School of Music, but I have this bus schedule, and I get on. So first of all, the train is delayed. I get to Lansing. I might barely make it if I had been smart enough to take a cab, but my plan was I was going to take a bus. So I get on the bus. I'm lost on the bus now. I finally, I got off the bus, found a payphone, called Phil Cinder, who's the Tuba Euphonium instructor. At that point, he was only there a couple of years. And he's a young guy. I mean, I'm trying to think. He must have been in his mid to late 20s at this point. And so I call him, say, "I'm in town. I don't know how to get there. I'm going to find it." And he's like, "Just relax. Everything's going to be cool. It's going to be fine." It was like a Friday afternoon, too. So it's like everybody's wanting to go home. So I finally get there. I'm dragging this euphonium through God's creation and snows and over hill and dale. And I warm up and I play, and he goes, "Hang on a minute." And he goes and he gets Byron Autry, who was the longtime trumpet instructor. And so then Byron comes in, and it's the 2 of them, and basically they just throw tunes at me. "Play this. Can you play this? What else do you have to?" And so I just sort of sat there and played all these tunes, and I had no idea what I was doing. Just completely clueless. And I hadn't met either of these gentlemen. I don't know what the process is supposed to be like. And so Byron Autry excuses himself, and Phil Cinder goes, "Well, I'd love to have you come here." He said, I can't give you an official whatever, but I'm really happy with your playing. I would love to to have you here. And then within a week, I got I had already been accepted, I guess. And so I get this acceptance letter and my scholarship, whatever. And like he called me a couple of times, and it was just like this incredibly great experience. I felt very like I was important. Like I felt like he heard me and liked what I did, and he was, trying to get me to come to school there, which was a very flattering experience and overwhelming because I didn't know my head from a hole in the ground. So now, a couple of weeks later, I have my audition at the University of Michigan. Same deal. I take the train. Fortunately, the weather wasn't so bad. I find the School of Music without any problem. I go into the School of Music. I swear to you, this is a true story. I walk into the School of Music carrying my euphonium, and I've got on a piece of paper at X o'clock, you're going to be, playing in this room. And so there's if there was a place to check in, I don't know where it was. And there's just music students walking around. And I kind of figure out, well, I'll probably be able to find the room I need. I stop a student and I say, excuse me, can you point me to the practice rooms? The student doesn't say a word. They look at me and then they just keep walking. Like nothing. Not a hello, not a F off, not a you're an idiot. No, they just gave me this look like, yeah. So then I go find this room and I'm sitting, I sit on my case outside this room and I'm hanging, and the time is, say I'm supposed to play at 11. So I'm sitting there at, quarter till 11. And 11 o'clock comes and goes, and there's down the hall, there's trombone auditions going on. I see trombone players coming in and out of the room. And actually, if you did the math, you can go figure out who the people are. I'm not going to say any names. So the trombone professor finally figures out, after this nitwit is sitting out in the hall for 45 minutes, he comes out and he goes, are you supposed to have an audition today? And I go, yep. And he goes, can I see your piece of paper? And I show the piece. He goes, well, the professor's not even in town. He's gone. I'm really sorry. There's been some sort of mix-up. And I said, okay. And he goes, well, why don't you come in and play for me? And I said, okay. So I go in and play some tunes, and he's like, well, you sound really good. He goes, I'm not really in control of whether they're going to let you in or not because it's up to the teacher. But I'll tell him that you did a really nice job. And I'm like, okay, thank you. So I got home, and it was like, as soon as I got home, I sent the letter back to Michigan State saying, thank you very much. And, I want to come, and it turned out to have been the totally right decision. I mean, just like that place set me on the right path. But then, a month later, I get a call. My mom's like, the phone's for you. And so I go, and hi, this is Professor so-and-so at the University of Michigan. I understand that you came and did an audition, and he says, well, and oh, by the way, I got the financial aid package, and it was a joke. Like there was like no scholarship, it was going to, I'd still be paying that back if I decided to go there. And he goes, well, I'd love to have you consider coming to study at the University of Michigan. I was like, well, about 3 weeks ago when I got back from my audition, I submitted my acceptance letter to Michigan State. Oh, okay. Very good. Very good. Well, nice talking to you. Boom. Wow. Okay. The tale of two schools. So that was my story. Yeah, a little different. So, and actually there are some threads that Andrew and I will pick up on when we pick this up in the next Listener's Choice podcast. So we I think have a lot to share in terms of that. And we're coming up on audition season. So hopefully you'll find something there for, if not you, one of your students or one of your kids or one of a friend of yours, hopefully you'll find something useful within it.
There we go.
That's what I got.
Well, we are out of time here, so thank you to both Frank and to Russell for the suggestions, and thank you all for listening and for supporting the podcast. If you want to help us out, you can do two things. You can subscribe to the podcast through either iTunes or through your favorite podcast app, so you never miss an episode. And also, you can go to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review, which there is a link in the show notes to do that. That really helps a lot for other people to find our already mentioned life-changing podcast. So yeah, I think that Well,
And
no,
thank you, Andrew.
I've been
really.
waiting for you to say that for a long time. So, you're welcome.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
And that is going to do it for another episode of the Brass Junkies. You've been listening to the Brass Junkies on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to help support the podcast in order to make more episodes like this one possible, please visit pedalnotemedia.com/donate for more details. Also, be sure to check out our latest recording, The Brass Recording Project, at brassrecordingproject.com. The Brass Junkies is produced by Joey Santillo. Executive producers are Andrew Hitz and Lance LaDuke. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.